This is the Red Bull Grand Prix of the Americas review show and the latest episode of the Paddock Pass podcast. I'm Adam Wheeler, and right now I'm feeling a bit like Fermin Aldeguer, charging forward, plenty of energy, but with big potential drop-off. Neil Morrison, are you a bit of a Johan Zarco, a misunderstood genius? What's your status?
I think I'm a Marc Marquez, a manipulator, deviant who thinks he has control of the world.
Oh, goodness. Right. Okay. Watch out, everyone, on this podcast. And David Emmett, I want to say perhaps Raul Fernandez, an underachiever with the power for so much more good in the world.
So much talent going to waste.
This show is brought to you thanks to the excellent support we have from Renthal and Pole Position Travel. We'll talk a bit more about the company's wide range of travel and race packages and activities later on. But rental.com has a Fit My Bike option on the website to find the best clip-ons, bars, grips, chain wheels, chains, and brake pads for your street bike. Neil and I are here in the COTA Media Center post-race. We've talked to the riders and we've watched, laughed and cried at our pathetic Alpine Stars Fantasy League team performances. I'm really just talking about myself there, as we'll see later on. And now we're ready to get tucked into some dissection of the third Grand Prix of the year. Dave, from the comfort of your home in the Netherlands, although quite a late hour for you, so apologies for that. What was your standout moment from this Grand Prix and why?
There were so many to choose from, and we'll get into some of the other standout moments. I think my standout moment was David Abrivio being interviewed by Jack Appleyard on the World feed, where he was audibly absolutely furious about what happened at the start, because his riders and Ayagura, they were sat on the grid with slicks. They made the right choice, they'd gambled correctly, and they were absolutely robbed. And what I liked about it was he's normally such a but he's normally such a diplomatic person. He's one of those people who are really, really diplomatic. I was once shouted at by Lynn Jarvis, and Lynn Jarvis again is a very incredibly polite and diplomatic person, but he gave me a proper earful. Maybe I deserved it. I don't know. I don't think so.
Probably.
I can see why he would do it. But yeah, I mean, Abrivio was not hiding the facts that he felt that he'd been completely robbed. And to be honest, he had been.
Fair enough. Neil, what about you?
My moment was when the race that we were all expecting to happen suddenly turned on its head, and Marc Marquez crashed out of the lead unexpectedly at turn 4. The third time that he's crashed out of the lead at this very Grand Prix, thinking back to 2019, 2024. And in some ways, you could say it was a bit of karma, maybe potentially at work, just after some of the actions which we'll go on to discuss.
Shenanigans.
Yeah, the shenanigans at the race start. It was a stunning moment. I mean, it was headed towards a pretty sleepy conclusion, and it wasn't the most action-packed race up at the front, but with Marc crashing out, that certainly added to some of the intrigue and the drama that happened. So when he cut the curb at turn 4, which was just a risky thing to be doing with the curb so wet after the rain, that was his downfall.
My moment from the Grand Prix was actually the Marquez run, which was a key component to the general sense of chaos that we saw, right minutes before the Grand Prix was set to go. We could also point to the Fabio Quartararo crash, which was really the instigator for all the sort of drama that hiked up. But
it was a sign.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the riders were saying to us afterwards that they could see something was going on. I think it was Alex Marquez who kind of had his eyes wandering to the side thinking, what's Marc up to here? And I can't remember which other rider mentioned it, but when they saw that Marquez wasn't in the saddle of the GP25, I know there was someone else saying that maybe he had forgotten like his chest protector or something. There was,
that was Fabio. That was Fabio, but it was also very, considering that it was Fabio who got told off for throwing his chest protector away. I can totally see why he thought it was, that it might be a chest protector thing.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm taking that as my moment because I want it to lead straight into our first talking point, and we're going to intersperse some of the key moments, or the key talking points, I should say, from this Grand Prix with questions that we've had from our followers on Patreon. And by the way, guys, the people that we met last night in the Bangers Bar, it sounds a bit more fruity than it actually is. It was great to meet up with you. Big thanks to Marcus for arranging that, because Neil and I turned up, and it was just awesome to talk MotoGP with some really friendly, fantastic people. So I think that's definitely got to be an annual fixture of getting sort of the Paddock Pass podcast crew together and having a beer and a couple of weird tasting sausages. So it was a good meetup. I think Neil would agree.
Yeah, it was. It was really nice to put a lot of faces to names, and just to kind of see the enthusiasm that people had for MotoGP and our show as well. And yeah, it was just really nice to connect. Everyone was really, really lovely.
Is that meetup MEAT because it was all sausages?
Yeah, there was like one or two veggie options, Dave. So don't worry, I explored it, which is a bit of a sin in itself,
And shout out to Marcus for choosing Bangers Bar, because the boy from Bangor felt very at home in Bangers Bar.
Hey.
Banger.
That's the first time I've heard that one. Right. But listen, let's get back on topic. I was asking a couple of the riders in the debrief, what they thought, whether they thought it was correct that a rider can just run off the grid, minutes, seconds before a Grand Prix race is due to start. And I kind of put the question to Luca Marini. He was one of the last debriefs to happen here on Sunday afternoon. He said, well, let's let the fans decide. I actually thought it made it more interesting. And as ever, Luca Marini, the sage of the MotoGP riding elite, kind of nailed it, because it did create this fantastic swirl of drama. And but I mean, Marc Marquez again has pushed himself into a corner where you think he's a manipulator, a potential villain. He's clearly been the best, the fastest rider at this circuit all weekend. Was the tactic even necessary, or was it just dastardly clever and we should admire him for it? What's your take, Dave?
I mean, was it necessary? Gosh, I mean, there really is so much to talk about this. Was it necessary? I would say yes, it was, because he did the sighting lap on wets, and that would have meant if it had done the sighting lap on wets, come in at the end of it, changed the slicks, and then done another sighting lap and gone to the grid on slicks, then it would have been, he wouldn't have had to do it. But he was on the grid on wets. It was clear to him that it was going to be dry, because the other thing that they said was 15 minutes beforehand, the track was fully wet. And then sort of the temperature came up and they could see the track drying out. They could tell that the track was going to be dry. And they knew sort of like with 7 or 8 minutes to go, the track's going to be dry. We have to be on slicks. Now, the thing about Marc Marquez is that he knows the rules. I would say that there are probably 2, maybe 3 riders who actually read and understand the rules. Both of them are in the factory Ducati team. Pecco Bagnaia knows the rules as well, which is very, very smart. Most of them don't, which is incredibly stupid. Because they get caught out with things. Mark knew exactly what it was. He checked with his crew chief. He actually got it wrong. He thought that if he ran off the grid and enough people ran off the grid and they had to have a restart, he thought he ran off the grid thinking that that would force a restart. But if it didn't force a restart, I thought, well, it's all right, I'll jump on my bike on slicks and I'll have to start from the back of the grid. But that's not what the rule says. The rule says that if you change bikes, then you or change onto different tires, then you actually have to do a ride through. So that was the bit of the gamble that he got wrong.
To bring us, sorry, Dave, to cut across you, to bring us to this point, the riders had done the sighting lap and formed up half an hour on the grid, which was a bone of contention also for Pedro Acosta, saying that half an hour is such a long time to wait. Then Neil, Fabio Quartararo had already touched I think the inside he just turned 3, or maybe it was just before the place where Marquez had crashed. He said it was a completely unexpected incident, and he has no explanation whatsoever for the reason why he went down. So that was like a little flash of a warning. Acosta also said that the back straight was like a swimming pool. I mean, the bike was aquaplaning on the sighting lap, so you can understand why the riders were in two minds between two sets of tires, whites, slicks or dry. But then, Neil, just to give an overview, what was kind of happening then? Because we had maybe 4 or 5, 6 riders maximum who had decided then to gamble on slicks when they were waiting on the grid for 30 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, Quartararo crashed because he was on slicks and it was still very wet at that point. But then, as Dave said, there was a big difference in the 15 minutes or so from that moment to, or well, maybe it was a little bit longer, to just before the race started, and the track had dried considerably. I think a few of the riders said, looking up towards turn 1, they could see it was almost completely dry. And yeah, if they had to come in and change, that was obviously going to be a big thing that would hamper them. But yeah, the guys that chose the slicks, I think it was Agura, Enea Bastianini, Brad Binder, and I think Luca Marini had a slick rear on as well. So yeah, those guys stood to benefit massively when the race kicked off, or if the race kicked off in normal fashion. But then a certain Marc Marquez intervened. I mean, it kind of depends. Your question, it sort of depends which way you look at it. I mean, in one way, you have to admire the sort of sheer brazenness of it. I mean, to sit on the grid and think just before the races, the warm-up lap is about to get underway, to think I am going to potentially bring this whole show to a halt and make this situation look ridiculous and delay the start and play havoc with the TV schedules and everything that goes on. To have that kind of brazenness is, I mean, you really must think that you are king of the world to be able to do something like that. But also, it shows you that, he was so confident that everyone was going to follow him that, I mean, again, you think you're king of the world. And I guess, in this MotoGP world, he is. So, yeah, but at the same time, it was a spectacular amount of, is arrogance too strong a word? But certainly it was evil genius.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like him and Gigi Dall'Igna are a marriage made in heaven, because they both read the rules and then look at exactly what isn't in there and exploit that to the absolute maximum.
Big floutage, Dave.
Yeah, there was no. They do not. We're back at the tax evasion and tax avoidance again, aren't we? I mean, they should both basically be corporate tax lawyers, because whoever they'd be working for would actually be getting tax back from the government. The gamble that Mark took was that everyone was going to follow him off. He's on pole. Everyone can see him. Where he is, right up at the front. If you're standing in 11th or something, if you're on the 4th row, you've only got a few people behind you who can see you. Now, if you run past them very exorbitantly, do you know what I mean? Extravagantly, making a big song and dance about it, then people might follow you off. But if you're on pole, then everyone is looking at you. Also, everyone knows you're the fastest. Everyone is looking at you. He just used a little bit of social pressure to do it. I mean, it was a stroke of genius, but it was evil genius, as Neil said.
I mean, we'll talk about. Sorry, Neil. I think we'll talk about Mark's race later, but just this particular moment on the grid. I mean, I thought it was a piss take, but then you just have to admire the devil.
Yeah.
It's
knowing the rules. It's knowing the rules and using them.
But as you said, Dave, not knowing them just as much as he thought that he did, because he thought he was, worst case scenario, he was going to have to start from the back of the grid, when actually it was going to be a ride through. It's going to be a ride through, and I think you mentioned that the ride through penalty was 27 seconds. So that's how much he would have basically had to forfeit. I guess you could say that he could maybe make that up on the likes of Agura or Luca Marini if he had to push it 100%, but that's, I think, a bit of a long shot. But you probably, just thinking back to the previous day in the sprint, I mean, what Mark did on the first lap, nearly high side and out of action, coming through turn 17, very scary moment. Both Bagnaia and Marquez Alex Marquez come past him. Yet 2 corners later, the guy has managed to put that ridiculously scary moment out of his mind and passed the pair of them to lead the race again. That's the kind of confidence that he's operating under, or he was operating under going into that race, where he just felt, I can sort of do anything. I can walk on water. So that was interesting.
Yeah, I think you have to put the incident into context as well, because we just had a Moto2 race where Jake Dixon had dominated, and Manuel Gonzalez, who had been leading the World Championship, made the wrong decision, taking wet tires, even though he'd set the fastest lap of the race right at the end. So I think the right tire choice was very sort of prevalent on riders' minds, and in what direction. Which direction to take. I mean, Luca Marini, for example, was saying how he couldn't believe how much the track had dried. There was a really sort of freaky edge to the climate that that nobody was expecting. But just to sort of, not to wrap up the subject, but just to kind of introduce one of the first sort of questions we've had from listeners. TV Room Raccoon says, what rules would we like to sort of see for these scenarios? Does there need to be maybe another change?
I mean, yes, I would like to. Yes, they're going to. Mike Webb said that they're going to have to analyse the situation with the teams afterwards, because again, this was one of these edge cases which nobody had seen. Well, they could have known, like there was a rule. So of course, Mark was going to read the rule and exploit it. And you can't stop people from coming off the grid, because there are lots of really legitimate reasons for having to come off the grid. Something breaks, the bike isn't broken, whatever. You have to be able to come off the grid. But what you should do is, if people want to change bikes or whatever, and someone is actually trying to force a situation like this, then you have to make sure that they suffer, and the riders who didn't come off the grid actually get an advantage. I'd quite like to see a staggered start, but I don't see how you can do a staggered start in MotoGP, because, and I'm speaking just purely off the top of my head here, I don't think there's the facilities in place for doing a staggered start. We'd have to have multiple sets of lights, where you let the people who lined up on the grid on slicks, you let them go first, and then wait for 15 seconds, and then let everyone else go. That would be the fair way to do it, but I don't quite know how you do that exactly.
Yeah, I agree with Dave. I think it's unfair that the likes of Agura and Bastianini that have made that correct gamble don't get repaid in some way. There should be some kind of thing, and I'm sure this probably will be addressed in the days to come. That if that happens again, the riders that have left the grid will have to start at the back at the very least. So yeah, I think that should be addressed. But I did catch up with, just speaking to some people in the paddock, and some people that were involved, not necessarily in the decision making, but had an ear to what was going on up in race direction, were saying that they were getting calls from the IRTA personnel down on the grid and down in pit lane. And I did go back and rewatch this just before we started this call. I mean, there were so many people exiting the grid, and that were standing between, they were basically standing on pit wall, and with so many bikes going up pit lane and potentially going for and jostling for position to get to the front of the pit lane at the time. I did hear that some IRTA personnel were just saying, this is so crazy. There's so many people here. This is a very dangerous situation. And I think that was probably principally why it was decided to just say, you know what, let's try and avoid any kind of dangerous situation, any potential injury where someone might get hit. I heard a couple of grid girls had to be almost pushed off the pit lane to avoid some of the bikes that were coming. It did sound pretty sketchy. That's not to say that this doesn't make MotoGP look a bit amateur. I mean, it wasn't. It wasn't. It was by no means an ideal image. I think for the championship for this to happen. I mean, it just didn't really look very professional, did it? So that's definitely problematic. But from what I gather, the decision to delay it was made on safety grounds.
Yeah, I mean, this is it. Race direction always has the option to change the rules to do whatever they like on safety grounds in these situations. So, like, stopping the start was absolutely the right call, just in terms of safety. The problem is that, one, you have one person manipulating it, and two, it's unfair on the rest of the grid.
there obviously needs to be perhaps an overview or at least a review of the protocol. And like you say, perhaps there is need for some sort of punishment. I mean, maybe not post-race, but then there has to be some sort of action made in the moment, because another listener, Justin Balin, says, it would have been lovely to see Ogura and Trackhouse rewarded for taking the gamble. I mean, gambling and choice and strategy has to be part of sport as well, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, it would have been great to see Ogura rewarded, and he deserved it. But the trouble is, as I said, there are very legitimate reasons for coming off the grid, and trying to figure out what people's motivations are for coming off the grid is really difficult. Like here, Mark admitted it. He knew, he was trying to force a situation. That situation was forced. Also because he thought that, if it isn't forced, then I'll be fine. That may have been, it was a wrong calculation on his part, but that was what he thought. But the trouble is, how then do you make sure, if you decide to punish for someone for it, how do you know it wasn't because they genuinely had a mechanical issue and had to come off the grid? You then you're punishing them for a serious situation.
As was the case with Marc Marquez, whose KTM stopped twice, due to an electronic thing. It wasn't that he stalled it. And, that was, but it just added to sort of the general melee feeling of the moment. But yeah, goodness gracious. We were kind of settling in for a routine Marc Marquez victory, and then this happens. Gotta love MotoGP, that's for sure. Let's have a quick review of the results. Pecco Bagnaia, of course, winning the Grand Prix. That's his 30th Premier Class win. Is it 30 Premier Class or career win?
30.
See which step that was. Alex Marquez now calling himself Mr. P2, finishing runner-up and now heading the World Championship standings in the Premier Class for the first time. And then Diggia making the burst through to third place. And I kind of like Diggia's comments in the press conference about the situation on the grid, because it just indicates what a kind of strange bunch riders are. I mean, they do like to follow each other. I mean, Diggia didn't have any kind of planning or thought process. I mean, his crew chief actually said to him, whoa, don't get off the bike, stay here. But he said, no, I'm off, because he sort of like half the grid running. He thought, I better follow. I better do what everybody else is doing. I mean, that mentality to try to be on a level playing field, it's quite staggering. I mean, weird people. I found out today that Pedro Acosta races with a clove of garlic in his leather hump. So I have no idea what that's about. Obviously some sort of deeply superstitious thing. I don't know, Dave, do you ride with a bit of garlic in your motorcycle jacket when you go for a spin?
You're more a rosemary man, aren't you, Dave?
I am actually. I am actually. No, I do. I will admit to having bits and bobs. People have given me things over the period of time, little sort of like trinkets and stuff, and I do sort of secrete those away around me. But that's less because I think it works, and more because I just think it's really kind that people have given me that. But
what about Bagnaia, Dave? I mean, were you impressed? I mean, he took advantage of the situation.
I wrote on Saturday, because on Saturday he said, I've made a step, and he looked like he messed the sprint race up in the first 3 laps. He was way too slow in those first 3 laps, but once he got underway, he was really, really quick. Now, looking at Bagnaia's pace, he didn't have the pace to go with Marc. Marc was still 2 or 3 tenths faster than anyone. But, well, yeah, apart from the whole falling off thing, but let's leaving that to one side. But yeah, I mean, Bagnaia was pretty much faultless. This was classic Bagnaia, fast, smooth, quick. He got past Alex when he could, and he just really controlled the whole race. His victory was never in danger. It was never in danger once Marc fell off.
Yeah,
3 riders split by 12 points now in the championship. Neil, what was your view?
Yeah, it was a really strong weekend overall. I think even if Marc had finished the race and had won it, it still would have been a big step forward for Bagnaia this weekend. Yeah. There was the welcome sight yesterday of him actually getting stuck in for a change. And we didn't see any kind of aggression from Pecco in the first 2 rounds. Didn't really seem that confident in overtaking. Obviously didn't feel confident in entry or in the late braking phase with the GP25. But as Dave said, looked as though Friday things started to click into gear. And okay, he was slower than Marc and Alex in the sprint, but at least he was willing to give it a go and to get stuck in and to show the kind of aggression where we thought, right, this is what you have to do to try and upset the rhythm of the guy up front. And yeah, he got he certainly was fortuitous today, and he openly admitted that. But yeah, there were signs of, okay, he's getting his act together here, and I think that was probably a relief to everyone watching, because I think it's no secret that he is the rider most likely and most able to give Marc something to think about this year. And yeah, it would be a pretty dour year if Pecco was having a bit of a lousy time of it. So yeah, I think it's definitely a good thing for the championship that he stepped up, and as you say, it's tightened up the top of the standings.
Yeah, plus also, next race is Qatar. Bagnaia is great at Qatar. Marc is okay at Qatar. Pecco needed this, it's really useful that he gets right now this really big boost in confidence going into a racetrack that he's really confident at and that he loves.
Props to Alex Marquez in second place. I mean, just the definition of being steady. In his last 3 appearances at COTA, he scored 1 point. I mean, DNFs in the first 2, and then 15th place last year. But now, P2 and looking like a worthy championship leader.
100%. I mean, yeah, he's absolutely the most consistent rider, and I think actually finishing second here is much more impressive. And even if Marc had stayed on, he would have been third. That's still just outstanding, and he's really showing that he's much better than a lot of people think.
6 times runner-up this year. I mean, the case of Alex Marquez, Neil, perhaps he's going to be on a similar pegging to Bagnaia in that they're going to be, I don't want to say fighting for the scraps of Marc Marquez's table, but there could be a contest there to see who can be the most consistent and ready to seize on moments like we saw from the 32-year-old former championship leader.
It does look that way, doesn't it? Yeah, and I think I said last week that this would probably prove whether this breakthrough for Alex is real, or whether it had just been a bit to do with the fact that he was, historically quite good at both Thailand and Argentina. As you mentioned, this hasn't been a good track for him in MotoGP, yeah, he was really strong, and I think he said that by far this was the kind of the worst feeling that he's had in the 3 rounds so far in 2025, yet he comes away with another pair of second places. And what I'm just looking at his career results. I mean, prior to this year, he had 5 Grand Prix podiums, and then this year he started with 3 in the bounce plus the 3 in the sprint. So it's it's kind of a new dawn for Alex. And yeah, I was quite impressed with just what he said. He was trying to stay with Bagnaia. I think this was when Marc was still in the race, and he had a big front tuck going through turn 10, the downhill left-hander. Obviously a pretty scary point, and he just said to himself, look, 3rd place is a great result here. Let's not do anything stupid and throw it away. And in the end, that was rewarded with his 2nd place. So yeah, I wouldn't say he's looking like the real deal, but when you hear someone like Marc complimenting him, and not just in the sense that this is my brother, so I'm going to shower him with praise, but Marc was saying that Alex was actually like quite strong, was stronger than him in the 3 right-handers around the final sector of this track, 16, 17, and 18. And that kind of goes hand in hand with what he was saying in Argentina. There was a couple of fast right-hand turns where Alex was quicker than him. And yeah, I mean, for him to be faster than Marc in any place in this track, I think is saying something. So yeah, you're seeing the kind of the talent and the sweetness of that feeling that he has with this year's bike at play.
Yeah, I mean, he might not be fast enough to be, it might be difficult to say whether he's the real deal, but he's certainly fast enough to be a real pain in the ass.
Diggia third, on the podium, his first of the season, probably coming earlier than many people would have expected after his injury woes. Another good weekend for VR46 team as well. Franco Morbidelli, who was on the box last time in Argentina, now in P4. So, strong results. What did you think of the livery, Dave?
I thought it was minging, as they say.
It's not all right.
No, it was, to be honest, like when they presented it, it looks a lot worse than when they were actually racing, when they're outside in the light, which is like, I think like their normal livery as well. It actually looks better sort of in the flesh than it does than it does whenever they present it. But no, also interesting that Franco got politely out of the way like he was supposed to, and didn't sort of try and mess Diggia up like he did in the sprint race. So, and then Diggia's, it was a class ride by Diggia. He had a really strong ride, considering how he is still suffering. His shoulder is not going to be right for at least another 2 months. So to be able to do this is impressive.
And you appreciated his F-bomb in the Parc Fermé interview, I'm sure.
It was a good day for F-bombs. I love a Parc Fermé F-bomb. So yeah, at some point I think Matt Burt just basically gave up apologising for the F-bombs because everyone was doing it.
As it should be. Like, who at home is really getting offended by hearing an F-bomb? And sometimes they're not even like very clear F-bombs. They're just a little subtle one thrown in. Who's going to ring in and complain about that?
Exactly, and it just enforces the emotion that these guys have had. And I think in the case of Di Giannantonio, that's particularly prevalent because the guy looked knackered. He had clearly given everything.
He deserved it. He earned that one. He absolutely earned that one. Plus, also, it's not F1. They have their F in the title. We have our Fs in Parc Fermé.
Yeah, succinctly
beautifully said. Beautifully said. Yes. So if he earned that one, Dave, how do you earn yours that you shower your daily speech with?
A life of hardship and suffering.
Internal.
Mostly. Mostly.
Yeah,
just fucking wrong there, Dave.
Yeah, just a quick thing on Diggia. He was very, very pissed off yesterday. Maybe not so much when he came to speak to us in the media centre. He had calmed down a bit by then. I did try and prod him on multiple occasions.
It was impressive. It was impressive how you were trying to sort of wheedle it out of him.
Yeah,
Go on, slag him off. Go on, slag Frankie off.
Yeah, exactly. That was actually my the exact words that came out of my mouth, and in that tone of voice as well. But yeah, I'd heard from certain people at Dorna that they had seen him kick certain things in his garage after coming back from the sprint and, mutter a couple of profanities under his breath. So he was really angry that, Franco had kind of messed with him in the early laps and basically stopped him getting onto the back of that fight for the podium. But accepted that it is what it is. And, we're all out there racing. And today was excellent. And I think the fact that this came at the Circuit of the Americas, probably the most physically demanding track on the calendar, is just going to be such a massive confidence boost for him. He did say at one point, I need to look at, he got into a good position and I think he started to feel a bit fatigued and he thought, right, it's time to start looking at my pit board to see how many laps are left. And he saw there were 11 to go and he thought, oh, God, he was kind of hoping that it would be maybe 4 or 5. So he was absolutely spent towards the end of the race and kind of like Alex, understood that it probably was better just to accept the result and not try and do anything silly, catching the second place. But yeah, you're looking at Diggia as someone I think that can possibly start to do what Alex Marquez has been doing at the start of the season in the kind of from now until the end, because he's got the tools at his disposal. He's a class rider. And yeah, I mean, he's showing that even though I think all weekend he's been saying he's at 90% fitness. He's been showing even in that state, he's still very competitive and just a little bit off the front 3 Ducatis that we've seen this year. So yeah, impressive stuff.
When he took his first podium, he then went to one of the following Grand Prix in Qatar and said, I think I can win here. And we kind of scoffed at that. And now here he is taking his first podium in 2025 and the next Grand Prix is in Qatar. Would it be too far-fetched to say he could produce some more magic? Is it too soon?
I think it is for a few reasons. First of all, I think Pecco is really going to push for a win. I think Marc is going to want something back. I think it's going to be really tough. But a podium. Sure. Also, I think that even though the track at Austin is much, much more physically demanding than Qatar is, I think it's still going to be a little bit of a stretch for him to actually challenge.
Dave, speaking of Losail International Circuit, VJ sent us a question saying, at which track do we think the Ducati streak might actually end? Could it come as early as round 4, or do we have to wait for somewhere else?
Yeah, it could come as early as round 4 of the 2027 season, but I mean, it's Honestly, it's a really good question. I don't know. Namal maybe, Assen maybe, got Silverstone maybe.
I mean, there's been absolutely nothing from the first 3 races of the year to suggest that Ducati are not going to win every single race this year. I mean, again, this weekend was just pure domination. Had Marquez not crashed, had Fermin Aldeguer not crashed, we would have had 6 Ducatis inside the top 6. Yeah, it's really hard.
World
I know
champion's coming back, Neil.
He is. But, there's been indications here and there. Okay, Yamaha are doing it right. Honda are on the way back, but they're still miles away from the top Ducatis. And, yeah, that kind of stable is so strong that I could see them winning all 22 races this year.
Just to close the subject around Marc Marquez, let's talk a little bit about his race, because Seth McCann asks us if Marc cocked it up. I'd say by virtue of the fact that he slid along his arse and lost his foot peg and ultimately had to retire, then he did cock it up. But I think my general feeling of his weekend is he tried to be clever. He tried to twist the situation to his advantage when maybe he didn't really need to, because he was that good. And ultimately it didn't really work.
I think Marc Marquez is the most ambitious rider I think I've ever seen, and I've watched Valentino Rossi and Mick Doohan. He makes Mick Doohan look like a rank amateur.
Say it to Mick's face, Dave.
Certainly will not. Actually, I think. Do you know what? I think Mick Doohan, if it was any other rider than Marc Marquez, that you'd say he would definitely punch you out. But if it was Marc, he'd probably go, yeah, no, probably you're probably right there. But yeah, I mean, it was just sheer ambition. He hasn't won a championship for so long, and he's missed out on winning. He really, really wants to win everything, and it was just arrogance as well. It was just absolute overconfidence. Everything was going perfectly. The fact that he managed to manipulate everything on the grid so perfectly, get everyone to run off, get a new start, get onto slicks, get into turn 1 in the lead the race, open up a gap. He was just trying to run before when there was no need for it. It was just overconfidence, no need for it at all.
Yeah, it's not the first time we've seen Marc undone by a little bit of arrogance and overconfidence. That's for sure.
2020.
Yeah, Argentina 2018. I mean, there's definitely been more than a couple of examples of it occurring. And yeah, I think someone mentioned on our Discord channel, I can't remember who it was exactly, apologies, but they pointed to the fact that in Italian yesterday, when he was speaking to Sky Italia, Marc mentioned that Tardotti had been in his ear all the way up to the sprint race saying, don't try and win by 3 or 4 seconds, just win at the slowest possible speed. And yeah, maybe that wasn't the case, but yeah, somewhat ironically, he said it was when he had eased off somewhat that the mistake came, and he'd obviously built up that big advantage at in the first couple of laps. I think set 3 fastest laps in succession to build up a kind of commanding advantage, and then eased up a little bit, trying to manage the race, and just because he wasn't quite pushing as hard, found himself in a different part of the track and on the curbs at turn 4, and that was his undoing. So I think someone mentioned that proves yet again that biggest obstacle to Marc Marquez is Marc Marquez, and that was certainly the case today.
Yeah, it was definitely a way to, I don't know, kind of end this perfect run he's been on, in this particular form at this speed, and in the form that he's in. I mean, the lead and the advantage he took in the first 2 laps alone was pretty scary. It was formidable. I mean, Marc Marquez, let's see what he can produce again to come back from this in Qatar and the Losail International Circuit in 2 weeks' time. Neil, you mentioned the Discord channel. That's for people who sign up and join us on Patreon. We have various tiers where you can follow us. As a reminder for people who don't know, on Patreon we do special podcasts, particularly for those subscribers across the weekend. So Neil and I were doing individual shows on Friday and Saturday, rounding out and summing up the day's action. So if you want to get on board,
very
join
good
us.
They were too.
Oh, thank you very much, Dave. And join the Discord channel, of course. Importantly, just to interact, talk with us, ask questions. Then head over to patreon.com and join one of our tiers. It's super easy. We also mentioned that Pole Position Travel have a range of options to travel, explore the paddocks of MotoGP and World Superbike, and also they have some cool activities away from the tracks. And we have a discount code for 2025. If you want to book anything through polepositiontravel.com, then use PPOD25X, PPOD25X. The guys are now moving packages for both the Qatar Grand Prix, involving a dinner event with the designer of the LaSalle International Circuit, and the French event at Le Mans. So again, just use PPOD25X to get booking and get a small discount off there. And once again, we've got our first live show. The Paddock Pass podcast will be trying to blag our way through our first live effort at the Sherry Park Hotel on Friday evening in Jerez for the Spanish Grand Prix. So if you're in town and you're going to be watching the Grand Prix and you're staying pretty central, I mean, the Sherry Park Hotel is quite prominent there, then come along, pay €25 on the door. If you want some dinner, there's also that option through the Pole Position Travel website, and come and watch and laugh at us and heckle and join some bench racing. It's going to be fun. It's certainly going to be interesting, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Right, moving on to our hire, fire and liar sections. I'm going to come over to you first, Neil. Who was your hire option from this Grand Prix?
My higher option was Fabio Di Giannantonio, just because I think when he broke his collarbone on the first day of the Sepang test in somewhat farcical circumstances, to say that he would have bounced back from that with an extremely strong start to the year, fifth in the second race and now third in his third. I think that would have seemed quite fanciful at the time. So it's been a really strong recovery from a very serious left shoulder injury, which was then hampered by breaking his left collarbone. Diggia gets my nod.
My hire is going to be Jack Miller, finishing top 5. I think that is above expectations for what people were kind of pondering the Australian could achieve in his first year on the Yamaha. And that actually led to a couple of questions actually that we had in. Barry Power says, it seems Jack's style seems to suit an inline 4 all along. How different would his career have been if he'd been on a Yamaha earlier? Thoughts on that, Dave?
It's a good question. I don't know. I think it's really difficult to say. But yeah, it's quite clear that he really suits the Yamaha. He's really good at the balance. You could also say that because of the time that he spent on the KTM and the Honda and the Ducati, that gives him an extra little bit of insight and a way to use the Yamaha in the way that other riders aren't.
And I think it's a good shout out for him to be your hire, because on our Patreon page, we asked our patrons to vote for their rider of the GP. And just as it stands currently, at the time of recording, Jack Miller has been voted the rider of the GP by 45% to Pecco Bagnaia's 22%. So, fifth place is all well and good, but getting the Paddock Pass podcast rider of the GP gong is really what Jack is going to take heart from, I think.
We have to try and maybe fashion some sort of physical award for that, like a medal or something. Also related to this subject,
like a Motor Matters hat.
Yeah, or like a big woolly fleece or something. Hugo Dolomon asks why Jack was able to get a good result while Fabio was going backwards, and it wasn't just related to tyre choice. Any kind of insight we want to share there with the listeners?
Yeah, I think, Fabio obviously crashed and then had to go out on his second bike, and he said new chassis, or a different chassis on that bike, different swing arm, and there was another different part as well. So it was quite to get his head around. Yeah, linkage,
suspension linkage. Yeah.
Exactly. And then he also said he was having an electronics issue.
The fuel warning light was coming on.
Right, exactly. So
which would distract you.
Which would distract you quite a bit. So to say that it was a messy race is something of an understatement. I think we saw from Fabio in the sprint race, that was an absolutely brilliant performance from him on Saturday, and he was just really getting stuck in. I'm not trying to downplay what Miller did. He had a fantastic ride here on the Sunday, but I think, Fabio was also showing signs this weekend that he could have been at that level, if not a little bit higher. So, I think a positive week after a disaster in Argentina. It was good to see signs of life from Yamaha.
Dave, in your opinion, who would be gaining employment from this Grand Prix?
For me, it's the championship leader. Alex Marquez is proving, as I said, that he's a class act, and it's just his consistency. That's what's been most impressive about him. He's always there. Because on Friday in the wet, he looked like he was nowhere, but he ends up with 2 seconds. So yeah, class act.
Onto the firing category, I'm going to nominate Pedro Acosta on this one. He said to us that he basically took everything back to 2024 settings in terms of the motorcycle, everything he was using. Obviously, the Red Bull Grand Prix of the Americas was a decent race for the rookie last year. And here his demeanor was of anger, disappointment, and also a touch of surliness. Now he seems to really be losing patience with his predicament and his situation, or the potential for results.
He's gone. He's gone.
Yeah, he said, the bike was continually locking, I think, from something absurd like the 10th corner, or there was, very early on the race, he kind of saw that he was knackered for top 5 finish. But it's a pretty bum situation, really, for the rider that we think in talent alone stands out from the KTM situation. Whereas next to him, it seems that Brad Binder has found something. That's what he told us, at least in warm-up this morning. And Elia Bastianini is quietly making superb progress. I mean, to move from P17 on the grid up to 7th, hit that combination there with Girbiola, his crew chief, seems to be paying off dividends without really shining at the front of the pack. And then Maverick Vinales as well obviously had his issues, but he wasn't stupidly slow either.
Yeah, I joked with a friend of mine about Enea Bastianini that he needs to take up endurance racing, because the longer the race goes on, the better he gets.
Yeah, and someone that is associated with KTM, who shall remain unnamed, was berating Bastianini earlier for only riding an effing 80% on Fridays. Yeah, so he's not. You're not going to get the full package all weekend long, are you?
Yeah. Neil, who was your fire?
My fire was Joan Mir because again another weekend like Argentina, when we saw real progress made by Honda. Luca Marini and Mir both in Q2, both on the 3rd row of the grid, big step forward compared to last year, and they've got this very good bike now, which has made a big step forward from what they had last year. Yet Mir still keeps bloody crashing the thing, which isn't really very good. And it doesn't really make you think that he's the man that's going to eventually lead Honda back to score decent results. He's got a good bike under him, and he's thrown away an even better qualifying because he crashed there. A decent result in the sprint, and a decent result on Sunday. So he was 11th, I think, when he fell, but we saw some of the late progress that the riders were making. And now that Honda finally has a good bike, Mir needs to step up, and the speed's there. He's shown that, but the results certainly haven't.
My wife is starting to comment on Joan Mir's crashing, so you're absolutely right.
That's the real kind of verdict there when Rocha starts making judgments. Yeah,
exactly.
Beware, Joan Mir. Dave, who was your fire?
My fire is every rider except for Marc Marquez and Pecco Bagnaia, who hasn't bothered to actually read the bloody rules. Because the reason that Marc can do these things is because he reads the rules and he knows the rules and he understands that there's massive amount of benefit to be gained from understanding the rules and exploiting the rules. And the rest of them, Fabio Quartararo, I think he said, he didn't know what was going on. He didn't know what was happening. He didn't know what he was allowed to do. Like, read the bloody rules. Read the rule book. It's there. Understand it. And if you don't want to read it, get someone to explain it to you, because it's really, really important to understand it.
Spoken like a true rule reader, wouldn't you say, Ad?
Yeah.
You should give Marquez your rate, Ad. Oh, sorry, Dave. You can maybe read it for him.
I'm prepared to. My rates are very reasonable.
And you like to fracture an odd rule now and again, Dave, as a contrarian. So let's not try and be the knight in white armor here.
No, but this is it. This is genuinely my computer programming background. Is you're given a system and you're told what it does, and then you play around with it and see if you can get it to do all sorts of things that it's not supposed to do, and get around all the ways which have been put in place to stop you from doing things. And So yeah, look. Marc Marquez is a hacker. That's all I'm going to say. And but to be a elite hacker, what you need to do is understand how the system works so well that you can break it without people realizing you're breaking it.
Come on then, Dave. Who was your liar from the Grand Prix?
But my liar was Maverick Vinales for coming in and saying he had a technical problem in the sprint race when he had, massive chatter and vibration, the same as everyone else. Not just the KTMs. All of the KTMs had massive chatter and vibration. The Ducatis were having it. The Hondas were having it. The Yamahas were having it. Everyone was having chatter and vibration, but they all carried on racing. Whereas Maverick decided, oh no, this is terrible. I'm just going to pack it in. So for the creative excuse award goes to Maverick Vinales.
I don't really have much to say in the liar category. I think I'll just pin the badge on Luca Marini because he's now gone 12th, 10th, 8th. I said to him, opening his debrief, you only got a couple more races, you're going to be right where you want to be. But he's been sort of saying, he's been emphasizing modesty with HRC's progress, but then this was a solid result, and again an upward tick in form. The message from Castro HRC at the moment seems to be that the bike is rideable and it's enjoyable to ride, but they're having difficulty racing it. I mean, that was the message as well coming from Joan Mir. He was really pissed off, actually, before we got him talking about other subjects, and he seemed to mellow a bit. But he was just saying, he's when he comes to overtaking and pushing the envelope with other riders, then that's where he's skirting too thin an edge and crashing sometimes. So, but yeah, I'll just say Luca because I don't really have any other decent nominations. Neil, yourself?
Yeah. Also, I think. There were hints that Honda are going to have a new engine at the Jerez test, and I think that will, that might be something really big and really interesting.
My liar was Jake Dixon because despite topping every session on Friday and every session on Sunday by quite a considerable margin, he was continuing with his whole, I'm only going for the top 5. That's my aim on Sunday, when it was very clear that his aim was a good deal higher than that. And I do respect it because I think it's clearly working, not trying to put too much pressure on his shoulders. Caught up with Ben Doe, a technician that worked with Jake in his Petronas Moto2 days, and is working with Jake now in Mark VDS, and he mentioned just how different the figure is in 2025 compared to earlier. Earlier, he was in one massive big rush about getting results, winning, proving himself on the world stage, getting to MotoGP, whereas now that doesn't really seem to be, at least publicly anyway, that doesn't seem to be in his kind of orbit or in his radar. By kind of keeping the pressure off him, he's really performing and showing some fantastic results and showing that he could potentially be a World Championship challenger at the very least this year. So, I think Dixon's had a fantastic start to the year, and but he was telling little porkies when he was saying only top 5.
Yeah, he's, winning back to back. I mean, you have to count him as a championship contender, even though around 3. And actually, kind of leads on to, and don't shake your head, Dave. It actually leads on to a question from Stuart Edwards, who says, is Jake now perhaps too old to be considered an option for MotoGP?
I think he is. I think that that train has left the station, but I also think that it doesn't matter. I do think he's going to be being a world champion, and I think that really Moto2 needs just outstanding riders who are the people that young riders come in and have to beat if they want to get to MotoGP. Jake Dixon is just riding out of his skin. It was a fantastic race today. He's having a really, really good season. I think he's probably the favourite for the championship, or one of the favourites for the championship. There's maybe 2 or 3 riders. He's going to be there. If he can keep on winning, then he's going to have a really good career in Moto2. He's going to be extremely popular. Does he get to MotoGP? I think he would be better off winning in like Sam Lowes. He's better off winning in Moto2 than going to MotoGP and being miserable.
Yeah, I'm currently liking Moto 2 as well, just the haphazard nature of it. Riders, Tony Arbolino joining him on the podium, Alonso Lopez, I think, for the first time this season. We saw people like David Alonso, Daniel Holgado having another strong GP, Colin Vaya as well, getting his first top 10 as a rookie. Some decent results, or some strange results. Vaya. Sorry. Well, it wouldn't be a Paddock Pass podcast without one mispronunciation from me. But yeah, I'm impressed that you managed to correct me, Neil, instead of Dave. Yeah, it's usually the Italian one. That's true. Carbonara. Anyway, moving on. This is my favorite part of the podcast. I'm going to hand straight over to you, Neil. What the fuck's going on with the Alpine Stars Paddock Pass podcast Fantasy League? Apologies for the F-bomb, Alpine Stars. We really appreciate your support on this one.
Yeah, we do indeed. Just before we get to that ad, I would like to give a shout out to Adam Cole and Jeff Jackson, who predicted correctly on our Patreon page that Alex Marquez was going to finish second in both the sprint and on the feature race on Sunday. Top work there, lads. And also a shout out to Lynn Biggs, who mentioned that Mark crashed out in 2019. That was kind of where she was supposed to make a prediction. So Lynn maybe knew something that the rest of us didn't. So fair play on that regard. With regards to the league, currently Double B's BB88 is first. Is that you in disguise, Dave? It sounds like a David Emmett kind of acronym. Steve English is the top of our lot, unfortunately, 346th. I'm 367th. Dave is 1,546th. And Adam, you're 2,015th.
2015th. What, from 2020? Jesus.
Yeah,
I put Marc Marquez is a gold rider on the one weekend the fucker falls off.
I've had him as gold rider, and then I went and decided to boost him, which works out well on Saturday, but not so much on Sunday. I boosted him through the gravel, is what I did.
Neil, what's your secret? Because Steve's not on the call. So who was your four riders just quickly this weekend?
The Marquez brothers in gold, Gura and Aldeguer in silver. And
Aldeguer.
Ducati Factory and Ducati Factory is the team.
Right, okay. Aldeguer nearly got you a lot of points there. That was a shame.
Yeah, at one point, I mean, it is worth mentioning that Aldeguer at one point was going, I think, a second faster than Pecco Bagnaia towards the end. I mean, there was a kind of error of predictability, his crash, but it did show that, okay, the guy's starting to work it out.
Let's move on to our grades. Let's finish up with that. I'm going to say a big meaty 8. I think the weather, while it wasn't particularly pleasant for the facility in the Grand Prix, it certainly created a mess, a real headache from the teams right the way from Friday morning. It was pissing down here on Thursday. It even cancelled the MotoGP football match, much to my dismay. So I think that, and when I kind of walked around the circuit in the brief time that there was, it seemed busy. It's always, this place, as we've said before, is like Silverstone. It's so kind of sprawling and vast that it can be hard to get a gauge on how many people are here. But I thought it was a decent turnout, unpredictable racing, and some class performances as well. I mean, we have to give a nod, I think, also to Jose Antonio Herrera. 3 consecutive podium finishes, 2 wins now as well this season, looking very strong in Moto 3. A decent 8. Dave?
I'm going to give it an 11 because just because of the chaos. It was delightful. I was feeling very sorry for myself earlier today for no particular reason other than, existential angst. But it was, the whole chaos at the start absolutely cheered me up. And also like the weather going backwards and forwards, there was a lot to like. There was a lot to learn. Also, just seeing it was a pleasure to see Honda make a step, Yamaha make a step, to see them catching up, which is the whole point of the concessions. It was just, I enjoyed it a lot.
Well, to continue the Spinal Tap theme, here's Neil Morrison live and untapped.
I'm trying to think of a quick Spinal Tap jest. It's one of my favorite films, and I can't actually get one off the top of my head, unfortunately. I wish you would give me a bit more of warning towards this ad, but I'm going to give it
Dave's the one to put up to 11, mate.
Right, okay. Well, I'm going to give it a 9 because I mean, it's just been a fun weekend, hasn't it? Part of that 9 was definitely influenced by the lovely meetup that we had with our Paddock Pass podcast followers on Saturday night. That was a great evening. Just been a couple of nice times away from the track. And today, I mean, let's face it, the racing wasn't that brilliant, but it was dramatic, and the rain really threw a cat amongst the pigeons and kept it very interesting. And the whole drama with the start just kind of added to the air of chaos that surrounded the event. So a good 9 for me, Ad. And unfortunately, I don't have anything to pull out of my trousers in a similar manner to the bass player from Spinal Tap at the end of this. But yeah.
Okay, everyone. Well, listen, that's it for this week. Thanks to Renthal and to Pole Position Travel. Listen out for the World Superbike content coming up from Steve, Gordo, Evo, and all the stuff and insight we can bring from World Superbike on a weekend where Taprak, I think pretty much threw his hat back in the ring. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, like really good races. This World. If you haven't seen them, go and see if you can catch the World Superbike races because they were crackers.
Yeah, and we've also got some cool interviews coming up as well. We had, one with Pedro Acosta where we got him to answer your questions. So that'll be coming up maybe next week as a preview to Qatar. But also our Patreon channel will be chocker with that particular material as well. Thanks ever so much for listening. We'll be back soon.